So it struck me as I started reading this book, and this is something I was thinking about throughout it. It's a conversation that many black writers and journalists and thought leaders have very often amongst ourselves, is what is the role of the black public intellectual, the black writer, in engaging a white audience? One thing that came to mind is I remembered a response that Ta-Nehisi Coates had given during a book conversation he was having, and he said, about who his audience was. He was asked essentially, why do white people love you so much, right? And he said, talking about who he writes for, I felt like many of the people I was reading in the 90s and when I was in college were very much burdened by the need to explain to white people, that it affected their language.
Right.
Now you set out in this space with the stated goal and purpose of proselytizing to white people, right?
Yeah.
This was, believe it or not, titled a sermon, right?
Right.
What do you see as the role of black men and black women who are engaged in telling the stories of black trauma and black pain?
Right.
And what is the responsibility of the black writer then to engage with white audiences, with the white majority?
Yeah. No, it's a great point. You know, and look, and I identify with many of my millennial students who say, look, I'm not here to teach you. Speaking to white America, but they talk to me. But they're talking to you, but they're speaking to me. I'm not here to teach you anything. I can't say that. I'm literally a teacher. Yes, I'm here to teach you. And I get all kind of hate mail from white people who call me nigger. Might as well say it. I got 10 emails today out of my name, nigger this, nigger that. And I'm going, I'm such a nice guy. Could you at least say Professor Nigger, please? I work hard for this PhD from Princeton, bruh. Can you at least shout me out on the pedigree of my Ivy League? So you get that kind of blowback, and you get that kind of animus, and you get that kind of hostility, and some of the letters I get from irate parents, I can't believe you're a professor at Georgetown, you're trying to warp the minds of my children. Yeah, I am, actually. That's my stated goal. Because you done warped them up so bad, beam them up, Scotty. Warp speed of intense malevolence, I got to try to rejigger that thing. I got to try to open those minds up. I got to try to engage them. Yes, I want to warp the warp you've given to them. I want to deconstruct it. I want to challenge it. I want to demythologize. I want to use words that might make you upset because you don't know what I'm saying, and you're really especially mad that a Negro was saying some stuff that you don't understand and cussing you out simultaneously. That's a form of resistance. I come from a different generation than Brother Coates, and I understand that inclination to say, I take the black universe as a norm. Therefore, I don't speak to white brothers and sisters. I've written 20 books. I done got plenty of them kind of books. You want to, you know, I got some books that don't even take into account what the dominant society might think or believe or reflect on in the sense of a cultural starting point. But my job always as a scholar is to think critically about this. And see, I'm a little bit more suspicious about the fact that even as an intellectual, it's not that we all agree about certain things. What it means to be an intellectual is to be a cantankerous individual. You know, herding cats. That's why intellectuals can't ever change the world. We can write about what changed it, but we ain't gonna be on the forefront. Now, some of us are. I've been, you know, I march. I was in the march on Washington here this past Saturday, and I've been involved in getting arrested and so on and so forth. Not as a summer job, but as a real thing. And no disrespect. But I also know that what it means to be suspicious and skeptical as an intellectual is to be suspicious and skeptical of even your own formations, of your own thinking, of your own thoughts, of your own surety, of your own certitude, right? That's what it means to be an intellectual, is to raise questions about it. It is not that you don't land on a particular ground and assert your position and willing to defend it. But it does mean that you're a bit more skeptical about the certitude with which it is articulated. You got to have a little bit more humility about, you know, I could be wrong. I mean, I think I'm right and I believe this is the position, but I'm willing to engage and negotiate. It's the difference between a Barack Obama who was willing to say, I'm going to reach across the aisle, even though I had many disagreements with President Obama and argued with him, especially in the book I wrote less than a year ago about his presidency. But at the same time, that's a different gesture of openness than one like Donald Trump, where I know the deal and I know what to do and I have all the answers. So as a public intellectual, as a thinker, I think what our responsibility is to raise questions that are troubling, both to the dominant culture, don't have to explain to them, although in this book I'm preaching. Because I'm trying to proselytize. I'm trying to convert people. I'm unapologetic about that. Ta-Nehisi Coates is not a believer, and I understand that. And there are virtues and there are ranges of truths that can be generated from that. But I come from a different tradition. I come from a side of the aisle. I'm trying to reach you. I'm trying to talk to you. Yes, I want to explain to you. If you don't understand, let me break that down for you. Because I feel sympathetic to some white people to go like, look, you throw me in the river. I'm trying to swim in blackness, but can you give me a lifeboat? Can you give me something to hang on to? So I think out of generosity and out of a genial spirit and affable spirit, we ought to engage people about what we think, because we don't all think alike. Some black people think one way, some black people think another way. Some are individuals, some think about the collective process of groups. Some people are not curious about or concerned with the impact of a certain stereotypical representation of culture. Others are only obsessed with that. So there's an infinite variety, not infinite, but there's a great variety within blackness itself. But in this book, as you know, I also not only talk about white brothers and sisters, I talk about light versus dark. And maybe white brothers and sisters don't know. You know, I feel like you're in church. Turn to your neighbor and say, light versus dark is big in black America. You happen to have two, yellow Negroes, one good looking, the other another guy. And so, the light versus dark, my daddy was blue-black. I saw how Negroes looked at him. I saw how he was judged. Some ape, some simian, and that's among black people. Some curious about him, don't let your children play too long in the sun, they might get darker. Or don't let your dark-skinned child marry another dark-skinned person because of the animus against blackness that we had internalized. So I deal with that too. I deal with the class differences. I deal with the homophobia. I mean, these are all kind of percolating forms of bigotry and tribalism that narrate themselves at the heart of our own self-consciousness, and I want to grapple with that as well. But at the end of the day, I am about unapologetically trying to tell white brothers and sisters in this book, this is what I think the deal is, this is what I think you need to do, and I think I'm trying to answer at long last the question that the young white woman asked Malcolm X when she came to him with a good heart. The young white woman had asked, what can I do? And Malcolm X is famously to have said nothing and then turned around. I understand sometimes you feel like that. It's that kind of day. You're a leader, you're black, God darn it. I got to tell y'all again for the 8 millionth time, I get it. But my disposition is if somebody asks, talk to them. If somebody wants to know, speak to them. Because as a man, I want to know certain things about feminism. I'm sure I'm a dumb guy when it comes to this, and I've tried to be an enlightened feminist. But I know, like white liberals, I do things, look at my anti-misogyny. Look how great a man I am. I'm with you women. And then I'm just re-articulating patriarchal perspectives left and right. God dang it. It's tough out here. So we're trying to interrogate what that might mean. So when white brothers and sisters are asking, I think we ought to reward that curiosity. But not simply curiosity, we ought to reward their desire to know how to do better. But we also ought to challenge. We can't just take you in and say, oh, that's great. Because there's some white folk who take refuge in the fact that I'm not like that Donald Trump. But Martin Luther King Jr. said white liberals can be some of the biggest problems and obstacles because they already are convinced of their essential rightness and that they're on the right side, and therefore that blocks them from doing the serious work of interrogating how enlightened liberal racism perpetuates itself too. So those are the kind of things that I think are important, and I'm just a born preacher. I've been preaching for a long time, so that's just what I be doing.